This is Scott Daly. Scott, blink once to say hello to all our listeners.
Okay, Matt, first of all, too soon. But also, this is an audio format. I can't blink on a podcast. Who wrote this bit?
I'm pretty sure you did, and then you made me read the really insensitive part.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of, oh my god, Jesus fucking Christ, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we're covering chapters 10.10 and 10.11. The worst thing ever happens. It's horrible.
I love it.
Matt, what do you think of these two chapters?
I mean, these are great. I think that we're on the same page, that like these affected both of us emotionally significantly, and I am really excited to get into it and perhaps talk about how that was done and why it works the way it does.
Yeah, I think we're going to spend a lot of time on that this week, and I am too really looking forward to that conversation. I don't think I've had as visceral a reaction as I did to the first part of chapter 11 in my experience reading this book. And I think, I spent a lot of time thinking about why that was. And I think we've got some interesting things to say about that. At least I hope we do. So I am very much looking forward to this. I like how everything kind of leads up to that point. I like how chapter 10 starts with some relatively happy bits, right? It's like a reunion. People are together. We're reminiscing about Brockton Bay times. And then that kind of like protects us for a little bit before we move into the really, really dark stuff. I just think it's well structured and paced, and yeah, let's I feel like if I talk anymore, I'm just like putting off getting to the tough part. So let's just do it.
All right. Quick announcements first. Fan art contest number 5, Happy Holidays from Earth Gimel, is underway. Entries are due by Monday, December 17th at midnight Pacific Standard Time. Winners will be revealed on Christmas Day. So please get those submissions in.
Yeah, and we got an email last week from someone asking for a clarification on the rules. Basically asking, does it have to be characters coming from Earth Gimel? Does it have to be that way? No, it doesn't. There is, like, I came up with the line Happy Holidays from Earth Gimel, specifically just because I thought it sounded clever. But if you have like for example, if you want to have a Christmas card from Amy on Earth Shin, sending it to her sister, which is something that she'd probably totally do because she's clueless, that's fine. So like if it's our basic rule is something, holidays related in maybe some sort of holiday card related, or a picture that would go on the front of a holiday card, and something like that. So yeah, if you want to do characters that are on Shin, if you want to do characters that are on Bet, it's fine. It's just Happy Holidays from Earth Gimel was like a distinct way of expressing that. And most of the characters are on that, I keep wanting to say planet, but universe.
See, I'm not sure if Amy is insensitive enough to do that, but I am sure that Carol is insensitive enough to send out a Christmas card that has like smiling pictures of Amy and Victoria right next to each other.
Oh God, she would absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Oh God. I'm scared someone's gonna make that now.
Yeah, now I want that.
Yeah.
All right, the community spotlight section where we read what people wrote from last week's thread. And the discussion question from last week was, in light of the impending wave of anger that's going to sweep over Earth Gimel, Tattletale elects to do nothing. Discuss what the novel could be exploring with this choice. When is it ethical to step back from a bad thing you see coming? Which I think maybe I added one sentence to this question that didn't need to be there, but that's fine. I'm perfectly happy with the idea that we're throwing out some ideas, and I'm just interested in what kinds of responses they get,
Yeah, I will agree that a lot of the focus on the question this week was on that last sentence, which again is okay. We kind of want people to think and explore this stuff, so I was fine with it, but that is what people latched onto. And I think it's because it's kind of like a bold declarative statement, right?
Yeah, it has implications, certainly. So, Hero of Old Iron wonders if Tattletale doesn't deserve a chance to just hang up the cape after having saved the world. Even if capes don't really retire, hasn't she, quote unquote, done enough? And I like this sentence, death should not be the only way for her service to end. So there were a lot of sentiments expressed, but I saw a lot along the lines of like, she's kind of put in her time. Is she really obligated to step in just because she sees an opportunity to? And so that was a through line, actually.
And that to me is kind of the most interesting thing to ponder about this whole situation. Like this idea of responsibility and like the ethical requirements to act, right? Like how do we draw those lines? When has someone done enough? Is there a situation where, because I mean, I don't disagree with Hero of Old Iron that she did a lot of shit. And like, at what point do you have to say enough's enough? At what point do you have to say you've done your obligation to the world, right? And you did your part. It's time for someone else to pick up that mantle. Or is it always like, if you have the power to stop something, you are obligated to do it? And I don't like talking in extremes like that, but I think it's an interesting question to think about, right?
Yeah, I guess I'll just drop up front. Kind of my reaction is the idea that different ethical systems will give different answers to that. And I think under some ethical systems, you kind of are like, you kind of never get to set down your burden. Like you're obligated to do the good that you see that you can do and avoid the harm that you see that you can avoid. And that's it. Like there's no karmic balance to it. It's like you would basically cease to be a good person if you stopped doing good things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'm not here to sit down and like declare which ethical system is the right one, right? That's not the scope of our podcast. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fun to think about these things, and it's fun to kind of explore how the book is not like concluding on those different ethical systems, but looking into them. Because I think this week's reading in particular, we have Victoria and her group, seeing a group of people start to go a certain way and not making the decision to step back. And yes, it's a different situation. But it allows us to compare these two choices, right? One person says, I'm going to step back. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to let this happen. Another group says, no, we have to do something. Just give us time, give us a certain amount of time, and we will do this. And it's an opportunity to compare those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to talk about is like, what does the character think about this? Like, are they letting themselves down? That's one thing we're always interested in, is like set aside the like objective different ethical systems and ask, what does this particular character feel about their own decision?
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. I think we kind of went off of Hero of Old Iron's answer a little bit.
I was kind of responding to several different questions that we haven't actually mentioned yet. So
yeah. Speaking of which, up next we have Tesserwat, who gives us a very thorough rundown of what a chaotic mess Lisa's young life has been. She triggered at age 14 or 15 and has been bouncing between disasters since then. They make a first argument that Lisa needs to take care of herself, and since she's already run ragged, she needs to tap out of the latest disaster and take some R&R. Then they make a utilitarian argument that, well, the current kerfuffle is probably not that bad, and she's legitimately better off conserving her energy. That's, again, like, I think this kind of circles back around to the tangent we jumped on, but that's, I mean, I like that point. I agree that, that you owe yourself, like, sometimes the right thing to do is to recuperate yourself and save your energy for other things. I think that's a fair assessment to make, that is this a world ending threat that's happening right now? If it's not, maybe my time is more valuable spent elsewhere. And I think it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few other comments along these lines, but I like this one in particular. This basically pointing out, like, she's great, but she can't be great all the time. So picking her battles is actually strategic, and this isn't like backing down out of cowardice. Even in her own mind, right? She's not like afraid. She's just like, I'm just not going to get involved with this, and that's a decision.
Yeah.
EXE JPEG Windows Movie Viewer sees Lisa's refusal to get involved as suspicious and somewhat uncharacteristic of her, and furthermore as part of a string of Ward era decisions that have been, in this poster's words, subtly bad and excessively risky. And they actually point out like a few instances where they think that Lisa has made some kind of uncharacteristically bad decisions. Like, I mean, the one that pops into my head is where she just completely miscalculated regarding whether Cradle would try to kill Rain. But this poster also pointed out some other ones, and it's like, well, it would be interesting if like this were a bad decision and that Lisa were like making bad decisions for some reason, like she's being manipulated maybe. Not something that occurred to me, but interesting to think about.
Yeah, that's a little bit Byron's chocolatey there, and not to say that it's as outlandish as the OG Byron's chocolate, but it is an interesting thing of maybe there's something, this behavior is a little unusual, maybe there's something going on. That had not occurred to me either, but I don't completely disagree with it. So
yeah.
Perditorian notes that part of the problem is the Tattletale likes to be the smartest person in the room, which now means that she doesn't have anything like an equal to fall back on or delegate to. That's an interesting point, that like this whole idea of like being able to step back and let things happen from an ethical or moral standpoint. Is there anyone else in the world that can do what I do? And she's kind of set herself up that no, there's not. She's kind of intentionally maneuvered things that way.
Yeah, there's this framing where, like, you know, Victoria's team is sort of a team of people with different qualities that they're interdependent and they all have their strong suits. But like the Undersiders kind of fall apart without Tattletale, right? Like, she's their entire like ops and leadership at this point. I mean, we don't know that much about them, honestly. We're inferring some, I think. But yeah, they're very different kind of organizational principle there.
Yeah, for sure.
So next poster, Slice of Pie, emphasizes that Tattletale's power is always on and that she's in constant conflict with it. Something that I think that you and I probably underemphasized in our discussion, just that the fact that her shard is a big part of what's wearing her down. And also they go on to say that it's possible that her shard has effectively undermined her confidence in herself, leading her to make this decision.
Yeah, I like that. That angle on it, that it's not necessarily that she's choosing to do nothing, but that she feels like her choice, like that what she will do will be the wrong decision here. Especially, I like that a lot, especially given that she's standing at this meeting and like listing off all the things she was wrong about, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I was wrong that March wasn't going to be here. I was wrong about the tone and like the whole kind of situation and how serious it was. So she's like listing all these things I was wrong about, and then is like, I'm just not going to do anything here. So yeah, I mean, that would be very characteristically Tattletale to kind of hide that fear, to get involved in indifference, in apathy, in a active choice to step back.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good read of her character.
All right, now we have Roundest Frog. That's a name I don't think I've seen before.
Yeah.
Says it's not ethical to stand aside from something bad, but that doesn't mean it's unethical either. You could give up your organs to save lives, but deciding not to do that is perfectly reasonable. Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, we make choices to not sacrifice ourselves to help other people daily, right? And that doesn't make you unethical people.
Yeah, this is kind of the one I was actually thinking about when I said that thing about like, well, it depends on the ethical system, because if you go to like, you know, Peter Singer style altruism, it's like, well, actually, you probably should give away all the organs that you can do without, and you should probably give away all the money that you can do without to get, you know, subsistence level, because otherwise, what exactly is the justification? Like, it's not really coherent. It's like, okay, yeah, well, if you accept certain premises, then that all makes sense, but like humans can't actually live that way. I mean, the concept of a supererogatory, like basically praiseworthy but not necessary act is one that I think is being kind of gestured at here. Like I like that concept where like there are good things that aren't required, and yeah, like that's how humans operate. So it's perfectly fine. Sarah Penguin again frames Tattletale's decision as one of self-preservation. They also point out that practically every move we've seen Tattletale make in this story has been aimed at prevention of conflict escalation, basically.
Oh, it's interesting. I kind of like that.
Yeah. I mean, they point out her interference in Hollow Point, her interference with the Fallen, her interference with March were all sort of like gambits to avoid things blowing up much bigger than they would have. She wasn't necessarily successful, but
right.
I think that this is accurate, and it's kind of a very interesting frame, especially for the former best friend of the Queen of Escalation.
Yeah, and I think it ties into her exhaustion and her decision at the end, right? Like if she's been making moves, been playing this really complicated game of chess to stop things from escalating, to keep things from tumbling, and it just hasn't worked. Like she maybe slowed it a little bit, but that snowball is still rolling down the hill. At one point, you're like, okay, I can't keep standing in the way of it and getting smacked around, right?
Yeah, right.
So it makes that decision a lot more understandable. Yeah, I like that interpretation a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Months for College says Tattletale perceives the situation as beyond her control and believes effort aimed at controlling it would be wasted. Anti-Chris agrees with the sentiment that you're not obligated to stop something that you can't stop. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think the difficulty here is there a situation that exists without like precognition where you know your actions, you know 100% that your actions will or won't work? And I don't think there is. I mean, we all have to make choices based on what we think we're doing is right, and if we think what we're doing is going to be effective or not.
Right.
So.
And this reading honestly just kind of pushed me to reconsider whether I even kind of interpreted what was happening correctly, because they're basically saying like she's not like saying like whatever, fuck it, I'm not going to get involved like out of spite. She's like, I don't think I can affect the outcome here, so I'm not going to waste my energy, which is it's a different thing entirely, right?
Yeah. It's a much different interpretation than I could do something here, but I choose not to. It's I don't think I can do something here. Yeah.
Jamie,
I'll have to go
ahead.
I'll have to go back and read the end of the chapter to see if maybe that's just a flat out misinterpretation on our part. I got the feeling that it was like not definitely one or the two, but possibly somewhere in between, you know, like she could maybe do some stuff, but she's not confident enough that it would work. Yeah. Instead of just, I don't think this is going to work.
Right.
So,
well, that's why I like the self-doubt comment where it's like, she may just be wrong, right? Or she may be operating from a place of just like exhaustion. So
yeah.
J Maniac, on the other hand, says Tattletale won't actually be able to sit this one out despite wanting to. The conflict will expand, possibly rope in somebody she cares about, and then she'll be part of it eventually despite having decided to sit it out.
Yeah, I think he's probably right there. Just because, especially in these two chapters, we kind of see that the scope of this thing is going to be bigger than anyone thought about. I mean, we specifically set up angry villains in last week's reading, and now we're very specifically setting up a bunch of angry heroes in this week's reading, and we have these two pissed off forces that seem to be moving towards conflict with each other, and that's just not like a fight and then it kind of de-escalates, right? It's gonna spiral into something. So I think that's probably safe that even if she decides to let this particular thing happen, she's gonna get rolled into it eventually. Yeah.
Yep.
Megafire compares Tattletale to Contessa, who is apparently retired to take care of herself after spending decades trying to save the world. So yeah, they're like Contessa worked really hard. She's taken some time off. Maybe it's Tattletale's time. Yeah.
Right. It's in line with the idea that like, hey, hasn't she done enough? Which again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wanson has a fascinating speculation as to why Tattletale's power is silent toward the end of the chapter. That it doesn't want her to stop the rampage that's coming.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so like the idea being like her power is pretty interjecty, but toward the end of the chapter, you'd think it would be doing its normal thing of being like, that guy, his weakness is this. Use that to needle him, to get him, to lower his defenses and or whatever. But instead, it's just there's no power interruptions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's in line with one of the things she says is when she's exploring about how tired she is. One of the things she says is how she's exhausted and she's tired of always wrestling and fighting with her power. So to me, the act of saying I'm going to do nothing is kind of the act of her choosing to swim downstream with her shard rather than swim against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
Lost Man 138 reminds us that Lisa wants the cops and robbers system. It was her damn idea, and that's where she thrives. She hates dealing with real violence and craziness and having people shoot her in the legs. She sees the villains all getting ready to leave the cops and robbers behind and folds. I like that. So yeah. Like, she functions best under a game that perpetuates a system that she benefits, right? That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And the idea that we're leaving the system behind is almost like a sign that her effectiveness in this new world will be diminished. And so she just decides not to even play the game anymore.
And I mean, she enjoyed being a cape back when it really was cops and robbers. And then didn't really when she had Jack Slash cutting her face open. And it's also probably... I mean, definitely strikes me that, like, who else do we know who wishes things could go back to the cops and robbers framework? Thinking of our protagonist, of course. So all these ways in which these two women are similar, but they just can't get along.
Yeah.
And finally, Kalsubalu V2 offers an interesting angle that Tattletale's choice is an active one. She actually thinks that it will be better in the end for the villains to rampage, prompting the heroes to band together and become empowered by the public. And I'm going to quote here, "Rioting supervillains is probably really bad, but it's also exactly the sort of opportunity that a budding organization like Breakthrough needs in order to entrench itself in hero culture." So the idea there is she's like, not only does she not think she could steer this thing, but she's kind of okay with it going the direction it's going, maybe.
Yeah.
It's interesting how there were like 3 or 4 different, not just like reactions, but like interpretations of what's going on in Tattletale's head, and I'm not even sure which one is right anymore. I know I definitely walked away with one more on the end of like she was exhausted and just figured her energy was better spent elsewhere. But some of these definitely made me think.
Yeah, and I think you know, her desire to obfuscate a lot of times is what blends to all these different readings, right? She's never quite, even when we're in her head or in a third person view of her, we don't necessarily even get, you know, the full picture of what she's thinking, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a result of who she is, that we have so many different interpretations of the same event. And I don't think any of them are like wrong, right? Mm-hmm. They're all interesting, and I think kind of, you know, cherry picking bits of each of them lead to a more complex, better understanding of Tattletale as a person that I like it a lot. So these were a lot of great answers. I really enjoyed reading through them.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's get on into these fantastically horrible chapters.
Oh, God, here we go.
So 10.10, Blurg, Crystal says, foreshadowingly.
This episode title right there, Blurg.
So Victoria gives Crystal an update on the latter half of Arc 7 and all of Arcs 8 and 9 and 10 up to this point. Crystal left in Torch 7.7. I think, or at least that was the last time we saw her. I think it's funny because it's not really a very good catch-up conversation at all, in the sense that it doesn't really convey details to Crystal, but it serves as a really good reminder to the reader of everything Breakthrough has been up to, kind of a little Cliff Notes. And Crystal is also able to remind us of like how things have changed in a pretty short time, saying things like, hey, half of the team didn't even have names before, and now you've had this TV appearance. There's something involving a prison, which sounds ominous, and Amy took over a planet apparently. What? So
yeah, you're absolutely right that it's functionally a great little reminder catch-up section. Characters, you know, in stories relate things to other characters all the time, right? We have moments where a character comes back from a long way, or we need a new character, and we have to have like time to catch other person up on thing. And, you know, you can make choices in that. You can like do, and then we told them everything that happened and move on, or you can like explain and have a person kind of tell the story. I think Wildbow does like a mix of those two things here, where he sort of summarizes but sort of doesn't, like you said. And I think the best part of this technique that is used here is that he uses Crystal as like a way of reestablishing the absurdity of the amount of shit that our team has gone through. Like like you just pointed out, like all these ridiculous events. Like they went on TV, we fought Lung, Goddess, we destroyed a prison, Amy became the leader of a whole universe. Like it's this astronomical list of stuff, and Crystal's reactions help kind of cement that for us and reframe our reference, because we've been with this team so long that it doesn't seem that unusual that they were going through all this stuff, but we use an outside character to reframe that. And how it's done here is so great, because it's more than just like an incredulous you did what. It like Wildbow has her channel the Wizard of Oz. Like, you sound like it was a dream, it was a place, and this guy was there, and her and him, they were all there, but they couldn't have been on TM. Like, first of all, that's like perfect Crystal, and I love her. Like, that's so, it's her energy and her sense of humor here just works.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it establishes like the things that you and your team have been through recently have been so fucking wild that when you tell it to someone who hasn't been around, it sounds like they're dreaming or making it up or something like that.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of how I think we provisionally called like the end of Arc 9 like the end of one of the books of Ward, because it wrapped up this major plot thread with Goddess. And this has the feeling of like we're touching base with a character that we haven't seen in a while, and we're recapping the story up to this point, which does feel like something that you do at the beginning. I mean, I admit this is pretty deep into Arc 10 now, but something that you do toward the beginning of like the new book, right, of a story.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Sveta interjects with something. Crystal replies, no, you're fine. You can butt in all you like. You're as good as family.
Yeah, this is an adorable little moment where Crystal matches Victoria's dad, like almost beat for beat. This is the second time it's been used, and it's been a while since you and I have specifically talked about the concept of 3 beats, and I don't want to, re-go through that entire explanation, but here's what I'll say. Watch for the 3rd beat of this. Watch for this to happen again, but don't watch for it to be just like the other 2. Watch for it to upend, change, or expand upon the thing that was created in those first 2 beats. So we see this again a 3rd time, maybe a little different. Yeah.
Also, something that jumps out to me is that Victoria's dad offered this from like a place of wanting to include her and make her feel included. Crystal here, I don't even think she's like thinking about it. She's just like she's just being nice and being genuine.
Yeah.
In both cases though, Sveta's reaction is to get, in the first case, like kind of flustered, and in the second case, she just like blinks and doesn't really respond. And like she doesn't like smile. She doesn't say like, "Oh, thank you. That's such a sweet thing to say." Like it kind of hits her in a way that is not necessarily like a purely positive thing, even though obviously those 2 people meant it to be positive. Just not.
Yeah, that's an interesting take.
Something that jumps out to me after seeing the 2nd beat of this is kind of the way in which the way in which Sveta responds to it, I think is important to notice.
Yeah, and like the cool thing is, I think this, and I'm not saying this is going to be a 3 beat. It might not. I'm just saying you see patterns and you search for those patterns, and the way the 3rd beat of this could upend the meaning could be a exact reversal of it, where someone says, "You're not welcome here. You're not family," or it could be something along those lines, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of different ways you could go with this, and I think it's interesting, and I'm very into exploring where this goes.
Yeah, me too. So all this catch up that's happening is in the midst of Weld putting the moves on Sveta.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful. They're like, we don't see any of the hesitation that we saw through Tattletale's eyes or when they first met. They're with each other again. They're comfortable. They're just genuinely enjoying each other's company, and I'm scared. Mm-hmm. It's too good. They're too happy. Oh God.
Yeah. It was pretty adorable how Weld is like basically not paying attention to anything else that's happening, because he's just like, just want to get my girl.
Happy. Yeah.
So just some interactions. Fought teacher, fought goddess. I have 100 texts from Aunt Carol, who was no doubt trying to see if she could reach me and use me to steer you back on course. No comment, I said. And 20 texts from your dad, who was interpreting Auntie C's actions, or crisis managing. Victoria's parents make me want to die.
I try really hard, Matt, to look at Carol through a lens of objectivity and fairness, but she makes it so hard.
Yeah.
She makes it so hard.
Right. Well, like, just for some reason I was like completely triggered by this like idea of parents like bugging someone's friends to try to, or, I mean, admittedly she's a cousin, but like, it's so that to me, this is one of the more like obviously boundary crossing things where it's like, Victoria's not listening to me. I'm going to harass her cousin and then try to get her on my side. It's like, no, that's some horse shit right there.
Yeah. I don't think my family listens to this podcast. My parents do that to me through my sisters all the time.
Yeah.
If my parents want to tell me something and avoid the awkward situation, they'll go through my sisters, and it drives me crazy. So yeah, this I hate it.
Yeah. It hits close to home. So Vista is apparently kind of, off in the distance saying hi to her dad because she has to talk to her parents separately. And then she leaves him and joins the group at the first opportunity. First, actually, she goes to talk to a mysterious duo. We later learn that her parents are going to make her decide who she's going home with, like now, right after coming home from a war. Yeah.
Parents in this fucking universe, Matt, I swear to God.
Yeah.
Remember when we were all, is Danny a bad parent? And we were having this really like tough, like moral and analytical dilemma of seeing, is Danny bad or not?
He didn't handle his wife's death as well as he could have.
Yeah, he's a fucking saint compared to some of these people. I mean, they're like arguing, like, I love the little beat, like they argue over who saw her last or who saw her for more time. It's like this petty bullshit. And like, he's not even happy to see her here. It sucked to see that her dad was showing so very little joy at seeing her though. And that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks. And we know, like, I think Vista has always had a complex relationship with her parents, right? Like, I think I remember one of her echidna clones, like, stated immediately that she was going to go kill her family or her parents or something. So, like, her feelings with these people are complicated and she just parents. God, parents.
I know. All right, let's try to move past this, Scott. Let's try to enjoy the rest of this chapter.
Yeah.
So a young man who reminds Victoria of Browbeat, described as sturdy, solid, and with a lady friend, an elegant style approach. It's Theo and Ava.
I wasn't expecting it this early.
Yeah, I know. Amusingly, Vista accidentally blows their secret identities. So Theo's,
he's swole now, Bat. He's much bigger. He got big.
Yeah.
Someone said to me on Twitter that like the new nickname for Big Theo is Swolem. And well, I love that to death. So let's make that official. We've got board canon now. That's okay. I dub it. It's done.
All right.
I love it. Love it so much.
Replace that in the document. Done. All right.
So, speaking of the secret identities, though, I think it's interesting that we've seen this kind of thing multiple times throughout the story, and I think one of them was just like Wildbow admitted to us, like, oh, no, I just accidentally used the wrong name there. But I think the point is, like, we've been talking a lot about how the game is going away, right? And like I feel like costumed identities, like having a superhero identity and a civilian identity, is part of that game. And I think like this, seeing these little bits and pieces of people like being a lot more lax with hiding identities and using different names, to me could be illustrative of the kind of dissolving of that central game of capedom.
Yeah, right. It's the fact that these people are introduced here basically is implying a lot about the way that these people have like perceived the status quo, because they're just like they approach this crowd like Vista kind of beckons them over, and like if the status quo were like back at the beginning of Worm or whatever, this interaction just like probably wouldn't have happened, because they're like different hero teams. They would maybe like look at each other from a distance and be like, yeah, I don't want to like create a faux pas, so I'm not going to go over there. But right now they're just like, hey, we're all heroes. It's fine.
Yeah. And some of them are costumed and some of them aren't. And they go through names. Like we meet Theo and then he says, you probably haven't heard of me. I'm Golem. So it's just like, they're just like using these names, interchangeably in public. And it just doesn't seem as a big deal anymore. We're just so much more lax about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of the Chicago Wards, it's evident that they, or at least Ava, have a chip on their shoulder about having been Weaver's teammates and also having been the stars of the infamous New Delhi video.
Yeah, I really like this little detail. It must be tough to be mostly remembered as those people that were around Taylor when she did all those things.
Yeah.
Like, not only do you not get valued like for your own contribution to something, but you're connected to the person who did that scary thing. And it doesn't help your image very well. Like I think the phrase that Missy uses here is damned by association, which is really fitting.
Yeah.
The part of this that I do really like though is while Ava's going through this whole thing, Golem is silent through all her ranting. Like he doesn't pipe in to contradict or to back her up. He's just kind of just chilling. And I remember, like, I know Golem had like a thing for Cuff back in the day, right? And I think the text here is being kind of coy as to whether or not they're together. It doesn't really say anything specific about that, but I think his silence here says something, right? I think he, on the one hand, he was closest to Taylor out of everyone in the group. Like they had a connection through their incessant training. So he's probably not gonna like completely join in with Ava's exasperation. But if they are romantic in some way, he's also not going to like publicly contradict her either and be like, no, actually, it wasn't that bad or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it makes me think and it makes you wonder about Golem and his purpose in the story. Like I get the feeling that he's not just like, these two chapters aren't just a cameo and then he's going to just like to fade to the background again. He could serve as one of the devices that could have our characters broach the topic of Khepri, because he's one of the people that knew Taylor really well, at least through part of her, a key part of her life. A lot of the characters have spent a lot of time kind of avoiding or talking around what Taylor did, but here's a character that knew her really well, and brings an opportunity for our Brockton Bay reunion to kind of broach these topics with each other.
Yeah, for a story where the theme is sort of healing from trauma, it does seem like at some point there's going to need to be a little bit more kind of on the nose discussion of it. I mean, they kind of mentioned some of it on the news broadcast, but
yeah,
that was not Capes discussing it amongst themselves and trying to sort it out,
Yeah, I mean, like no one has. I don't think anyone has like explicitly like talked about the experience of being controlled by Taylor, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's something we've seen amongst any of our main characters. And I think that's something that our characters are going to have to process at some point.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I felt like it was authentic that Golem didn't really jump on the bandwagon of complaining about Taylor. And
absolutely.
From what I remember of Cuff, she like is exactly the kind of person who would have a chip on her shoulder just in general. So
yeah, I agree.
That felt right too.
Like a metal chip.
That's right. Exactly. So Vista, speaking of, future Cape conversations, brings up the idea of trying to scrounge up a Brockton Bay Cape reunion. And this prompts Victoria to bring up Tattletale.
Yeah, and before we talk about Tattletale, I want to kind of zoom in on one of the things that Missy says here, because I think it supports what we were just talking about. She likes getting together with Brockton Bay people. She enjoys it and seeks it out because it feels like I'm putting a puzzle back together, she says. Everyone always has questions they never got to get answers to, And that's, I think this is what kind of led me down this road of thinking as Golem as this way to broach Khepri. We have all these Brockton Bay characters kind of slowly starting to orbit around each other again. And all of these people have questions that need answering. All of these people are working towards understanding the things that happened to them. How did we get here? Why? What happened? Like, what happened to our city? How did we start at this one place and end here now? And so I'm looking at this reunion, and I'm not saying it's going to be like a formal reunion or anything, but this idea that all these Brockton Bay characters are going to be coming together or being closer together as a way of, processing those events together.
Yeah, and also, I think that there's a chance that Victoria, we know Victoria does not have like a correct, accurate understanding of what the Undersiders were and did, and who was making what decisions, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's been portrayed to us very clearly that like she has her impression and it's incorrect.
Yeah.
The text has been very clear with that. So I feel like the fact that was set up implies that maybe at some point she's going to get corrected on that, and that's going to change her impression of various characters. Looking at you, Tattletale.
Yeah, I think that's a fair guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk to Tattletale.
Yeah,
let's talk Tattletale.
Let's talk Tattletale. So for some reason I pulled out like a page of text, so I'm not going to read all of it, but
it's really good. That's why you pulled it out.
Yeah. That's true. Actually, I was like, well, I can't not pull it all out. But there's so basically, Vista talks about offering her hand in friendship to Tattletale, and Tattletale went straight for the jugular, and said she seems happy being a villain, same type as Shadowstalker, I think. And Victoria's reaction to this, I'm probably just going to read the whole thing, but on the surface, I'd known Shadowstalker briefly, and she had been kind of nice to be around when she'd had a reason to be nice. I could believe that Tattletale was the same, but I knew just how shitty they could be when upset. Shadowstalker broke faces and Tattletale destroyed psyches. Shadowstalker stuck relentlessly to a path, and as shitty as she was at her core, however easily or excellently she could be a villain, she valued being a vigilante type. And from what I knew about her, that wouldn't change, however she was tempted. Being a vigilante served her ends, it served her ego, and it validated her to her core. Tattletale had helped the city, and in some twisted world where the chips had fallen down differently, she could have been a hero. There was a distinction, even, that she cared about shit that wasn't herself a lot more than Shadowstalker ever had. But being a villain served her ends, it served her ego, and it validated her to her core.
So, I love this.
Uh-huh.
Here's what I love about this. And words mean things.
Uh-huh.
So, and the word usage means things. So we start out this statement where, Vista makes this comparison that she's the same type as Shadowstalker, which I think our understanding of Tattletale as readers of the story immediately say, well, that's not that fair. I don't think those are I don't think they're very similar people in their motivation or their general attitude towards the world. But then we have Victoria like ponder this for a minute. And she says before this, you didn't pull that part, but she's like, I really want to sit down with Vista and like exchange notes and have like a long in-depth dive into this. And maybe it'll help me understand Tattletale a little more. And then she says, but on the surface right now, while I'm here in these moments, I can maybe come to a conclusion. And then we have the double beat of the use of the word core. And so we have the word her analyzing at the surface level, right? She specifically says, I'm just going to analyze at the surface level. And then she finished with these with deciding a fundamental truth of them at their core. So we have surface and core. These words, these words are specific, and it seems like they're chosen to specifically contrast in that way, right? Like she was just going to do a surface level read, and now suddenly it's no. I like at their core, they're the same. It's the same.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a Victoria thing, actually, to look at the people who have wronged her, the people who are villains, the people who she has good reason to believe are like not on her side or very different from her, and to basically say like, well, they must just be bad people deep down, otherwise they would be good. Maybe I'm not being entirely fair with that statement, but like, and I think maybe when she's at her more like philosophical and distanced, she's not that extreme about it. But there's definitely, it's a very human tendency. I see it in my kids a lot. Like they're at that developmental age where they want to say, is that a good guy or a bad guy when they're watching movies or whatever. Good guys and bad guys, ontologically fundamental categories for them. They do not appreciate the moral ambiguity of the Parahumans universe, for example. They want there to be good guys and bad guys, and I think that's just like a natural human way of thinking, and I think Victoria does slip into that sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that, like, the more you inspect this, the more you see her kind of doing it, because, like, there are moments in this whole internal speech to herself where she seems to be, like, trying to cut Tattletale some slack, right? Like, she says this thing. There was a distinction even that she cared about shit that wasn't herself a lot more than Shadowstalker ever had. She admits that this is true. She admits that Shadowstalker at her core is a shitty person. And as a distinction, Tattletale cares about other people more. That's absolutely true. But and then she matches her, and then the wording matches her beat for beat. Like, serves her ends, it serves her ego, and it validated her to her core. Like, she goes out of her way to give Tattletale this credit, and then almost by the word matching there retracts it, right? Like, it's like these two people, she's not the same. She's not shitty to her core like Shadowstalker is, but she is. Yeah. Right? Like it's just like she just isn't able to think clearly when it comes to this person. And even when she tries, she kind of like, she extends it out there a little, but then pulls it back real quick.
Yeah.
And
right. Well, we haven't talked about the hero villain labels and how kind of complicated and tricky they are for a while. Yeah. But like, it almost seems like some sleight of hand here where she's like, being a villain validates her to her core. It's like, well, you mean wearing the villain hat in the cops and robbers game? Because that means almost nothing. Like, she does very similar things to what you do, Victoria. She just does them a little bit more differently.
I mean, there's like drugs and guns and stuff too.
Right. And that's true. But like, in her mind, she's keeping the drugs and guns to like the minimum level possible, and sort of, yeah, it's corrupt. I'm not like defending it, like, but I'm defending it to the extent of saying, at least Tattletale believes that she's taking care of things better than they would be without her. Yeah.
So before we move on for this, I have one more question, because obviously I disagree that Shadowstalker and Tattletale are fundamentally, similar types of people. But I also think the phrase being a villain served her ends, it served her ego, and it validated her to her core. I don't necessarily think that's an inaccurate statement to say about Tattletale, right? Like, I think it does serve her ends. It does serve her ego. I mean, that's a little unfair. Like, it's not necessarily her ego. It's like her desire. And it does validate her on some level. These are true statements. I think where the thing breaks down is when you start comparing these two people that are very, very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree that, like, there is a interpretation of this that is accurate, but I don't know if that interpretation really reflects what's going on in Victoria's head. That makes sense.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. So Weld and Sveta depart to go home together.
Yeah, and Missy's like, "Hey, you guys want to get coffee?" And they're like, "Nah, fam. Yeah, we want to go home and squish."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I like that it's Vista who asks that, and everyone else is like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Theo then thanks Victoria for brutally beating a member of Empire 88, an action which apparently helped Theo realize that he didn't like the gang he was raised in. Interesting to see Glory Girl's violent excesses rendered in a positive light here.
Oh, yeah. I love this new kind of wrinkle thrown into the mix. Like, throughout the course of this story, Victoria has been going through a lot. But one of the most, like, constant, unwavering ideas in her head was this idea that she wasn't a very good person before everything went down with Amy in the hospital. This idea that in looking in the past and reflecting on the things that she did, she believed that she was too rough, too violent, too angry. She went too far. And here we have someone coming and going, well, no, actually, what you did there helped me. What you did there saved me. And it was part of a long chain that led me to where I am now. And I'm not like saying that this is going to be now as cut and dry as Victoria was completely justified in all the going too far that she did when she was Glory Girl. I don't think that's what this is saying. but I think it's adding nuance to the whole thing, right? Nuance that I think Victoria is going to have to wrestle with. We've talked about this idea that Victoria is really, really hard on herself. She blames Amy for what happened to her. She blames Tattletale for what happened to her, but she also really, really blames herself. And perhaps seeing that things are more complicated and more complex and less cut and dry than just I was too violent and therefore everything I did had no value. It will change things. It also had some good. Yes, you did bad things. Yes, you went a little too far. Yes, you hurt some people a little too much, but there was good that came from it. And maybe that's a path to help her kind of forgive herself for that past.
Yeah, it can definitely, I think, be healing for her to have some different perspective on things, which is what, Golem is providing here. All he's really saying is like, from a certain point of view, you did some good in ways that you didn't notice. So yeah. So I pulled this out. I guess I'll read it first. So Crystal says, I'm starting to think you've got a brute thing going on, Victoria, because you have run-ins with everyone and crash through everything. So on this show, we always value the perspectives of other characters on our protagonist. And I think this is interesting because I really can't tell if Crystal is like just needling her cousin here and trying to be funny, or if she actually thinks that it's accurate that Victoria has run-ins with everyone and crashes through everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cop-out, but I think it's both. I mean, I think she's absolutely saying it to needle her cousin. Like, that has been the common thread throughout their entire interactions throughout this entire first part of the chapter, right? Like, she's pushing her and bugging her cousin because she's happy to see her, and they're playing off each other, and there's a lot of playful jabs, and there's one point where she goes to like elbow her and Crystal blocks it with the force field because she's elbowed her like 3 times before, and it's wonderful. So I think this is a continuation of that idea that she's just trying to bug her cousin and give her a hard time and have some fun. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't believe it, right? That doesn't mean that it's not like that in her mind it's not entirely accurate. And if you look at like her perspective of all the things that Victoria's gone through in the time she's been gone, it certainly seems like she just, crashes into and through everyone. It's like, we had to crash onto this TV set because someone was going to say something bad about us, so we just had to barrel through that, and then we barreled through the prison, and then we barreled through Goddess, and Lung too. Like, I think that she on some level believes it, even though she's just saying it to get a rise out of her sister, or her cousin rather. Yeah,
I mean, it certainly describes Glory Girl. I mean, everything she does in Worm is smashing through things. Mm-hmm. It's funny because it isn't I think this is once again like protagonist bias because Victoria's always thinking about like the warrior monk and moderating her actions with like complicated heuristics. It's like no. She's not like that. She thinks things through, and she only enters combat like very carefully. And it's like, but when you zoom out and you look at the 5,000 foot view as she's describing, as she's giving the Cliff's notes here, it's like, she has kind of continually injected herself into the middle of these horrible situations. Yeah. So Crystal does have a point.
And she continues to do it throughout these chapters. Yeah. I mean, Crystal doesn't see the 3 paragraphs of introspection Victoria went through before she decided to charge into that fight, right? Like she misses out on that. But so I could see reaching that conclusion.
Yeah, interesting. Victoria does her justification before getting into the situation.
Yeah.
So Kinsey then calls Victoria on the phone to make her aware that Tattletale was watching, which we saw from the previous chapter.
Yeah.
And also to inform her that the dead bodies of some heroes from her hero tracking list have been found. There's some discussion of the upcoming villain meeting, which they've actually already, which we've already witnessed from Tattletale's perspective. So it'd be an interesting opportunity to talk about some different things that Ward is doing, as Ward has been doing lately. That I don't think were done much, if at all, in Worm, and not up to this point either in Ward, where we've seen the future relative to Victoria's storyline, both in the Valkyrie interlude and in the Tattletale interlude.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. That is the interludes are much less, moored to the timeline as they have been in previous arcs and previous books as well. And I think this is an opportunity to talk about that device, right? To talk about the decision to do that. We had this Tattletale interlude that carried all the way through the villain meeting that is kind of the ticking clock at the end of this week's reading. So that's 2 chapters in the past, quote unquote, that we have to go through. So why do it that way, right? Like, I think that's one of the things we try to do here is every time we see a decision made like this, the first question is, well, why do we do that? What benefit did that have to the story? And I think that the quickest and most obvious answer is our old pal, dramatic irony, right?
Yeah.
We know exactly how that meeting goes, and we know from Tattletale's perspective what's going to happen next. So as the heroes scramble to deal with these events and their stuff leading up to that villain meeting, their viewpoint on the state of things is highlighted more, right? Like, because we have an understanding of from the villain's perspective what the state of the world is, that there's a large group of villains and they think the game is over and they think the heroes are consolidating and we got to riot. So when we see the heroes like talking about like their side of things, because we've already seen it and because of that dramatic irony, it allows us to place more emphasis on that than it normally would have, right? This week's reading ends on a hero meeting that almost specifically parallels the villain one. And I think going through that villain one first and Tattletale's choice in that meeting serves to emphasize the significance of what happens in this meeting, whereas doing them in a different order might not have.
Yeah, right. I think, it's all about the order in which you receive the information kind of contextually impacts how you receive the later information, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's I was also like, there's an element of I don't know if ticking clock is quite the right concept that I'm reaching for here, but like the Valkyrie interlude was like 1 week. It basically went 1 week into the future from whatever point that was. This Tattletale interlude went 1 day into the future from wherever that was. Like, I'm wondering if these aren't all sort of like pointing at some point in the near future where a lot of things come to a head at the same time. Like, I admit that argument would make more sense if we could say like Valkyrie, like based on the schedule, Valkyrie's going to return like tomorrow. But as it is, I just kind of noticed like they're all just peeking just a little bit into the future, and I'm like, well, are we hinting that something big is coming?
I think that's I mean, I think so. I think we're moving towards an event, a breaking point, and like you said, this thing could have been done. Like, we could have seen the hero meeting before the villain meeting, right? Like it could have been structured this way. There's nothing stopping it from doing that. But I think the idea that the villains have, like, because the whole setup here is kind of that the villains have realized that the game, the quote unquote game, is over, and they've realized that before the heroes have done. So relaying that information to the readers in that order, I think, emphasizes that, right?
Yeah.
Like that the heroes, we have this hero meeting and they're still kind of talking about, controlling things and not be, and like, they're still kind of, the way this meeting is happening is still kind of instructive, and we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'm still kind of instructive of the idea of the game. And we know that at least this big group of villains that's about to meet, none of that matters to them anymore. So I mean, it's all about how that isn't reinforcing information. And I think a ticking clock is very fair as well. That I think we're moving towards a point.
Yeah, we're sketching out kind of the destination, right?
Yeah.
So basically, all of the heroes that are present at this little gathering want to they're in on this. They want to go check out this murder of heroes, even though they just came back from war. And I think it speaks not only to the specific characters, but to the whole ethos of heroes, and how upset this is going to make all the heroes, which is basically setting that up for the next chapter, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's like this that we're reinforcing this built-in idea of camaraderie between heroes that exists in the story. That you do something to one of us, you've done it to all of us, and we have to go help out no matter what, no matter how tired we are, no matter how far we've been traveling, we have to. And I think again this enforces why the emotions in the meeting that happens at the end of next chapter work as well as they do, because we've taken the time to reinforce, like through these characters saying we're all going, we've taken time to reinforce the fact that everyone cares about this. Like, we might not even know these people very well, but it's dead heroes and therefore we care.
Yeah, absolutely. It's creating this sense of like the hero team has solidarity, the villain team has solidarity, even if they're not really teams. There's definitely a feeling of tribes. Yeah.
And as we know, dividing into tribes on the different poles is a recipe for peace.
Yeah,
right?
It always works really well.
Yeah. It's almost as if the two sides are polarizing or something.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't see any connection to that. So all the heroes head to the crime scene, which is near Brockton Bay, appropriately, the land where dreams go to die. And it's described immediately as a horror scene, with people butchered and the bodies are torn into pieces and scattered over the area. Yeah,
and so I'm going to do the thing where I examine a paragraph really closely. Or a sentence. It's like 3 sentences or something. But because I actually think the way that this is set up is kind of brilliant. So they arrive, and then they say they arrive to a horror scene. People butchered, cops standing by and trying to stay warm while the wind whipped aggressively past us. Some techs were pacing the field, planting little yellow flags by each piece of a body. And then the lights, being almost solely from the cars, made the scene an isolated image on a page otherwise painted black. And when I look at the way these sentences are structured, it seems like Victoria is mentally building up energy to visualize the scene to us, right? Like we start with to a horror scene. We define it first. It's a horror scene, but we define it as vaguely as possible. Then she elaborates a little bit. She says people have been butchered, but butchered, as we'll learn, is not full context as far as the horror that has happened here. And then she cuts elsewhere. Like she goes, so we're leading up to it, but then she like, I can't do it. I've got to go somewhere else. So she turns the scene, and now we focus on the cops standing by and trying to stay warm. Then we switch to what the wind is doing. The wind is whipping aggressively past us. Then we switch to what the techs are doing. They're pacing the field. And then we finally built it up. We finally gathered enough energy and like avoided it enough to where we finally have to turn to the thing itself. And so we turn to the fact that there are pieces of body just everywhere. But even in the description of the pieces of body, the text is focusing on the little yellow flags, right? It's like the pieces of body are the passive subject in the sentence. The focus is on the text putting the yellow flags there. So it's like, even in revealing the scope of the horror that's happening here, Victoria's narrative like doesn't want to fully go there. And after it does that, it immediately cuts away again. It immediately cuts back to the lights being almost solely from the cars, making the scene an isolated image on a page. So we kind of work towards the detail, and then as soon as we get there, we cut away again and then move back towards an abstract image of everything. It's like I didn't want to go there. I had to go there. And as soon as I went there, I cut away again and went somewhere else. And it's all here in this one little paragraph. And I just like, I love how it feels. I love how it like makes you understand the horror of it. I love the detail in that so much.
Yeah, me too. I think, I'm basically going to like take this chapter and the next one and sort of like make sure to kind of keep them somewhere that I can use to kind of study almost, because they're doing so many things at the same time.
Yeah.
So the way Wildbow tends to write point of view characters is that basically what you are reading is the contents of that character's scope of attention.
Yeah.
And you move your scope of attention around, you're looking at things, you're then having a reaction, your scope of attention flicks to your own reaction, and then someone says something and you pay attention to what they're saying. This is a close third person. well, close first person here actually, and so everything is through the character's mind.
Yeah.
In a way that's very psychologically realistic. But he's not like he's doing that, but he's also making sure that you understand what's happening and that the information is revealed to you in like an optimally dramatic fashion.
Yeah.
And like balancing both of those things at the same time, I'm kind of in awe actually, because you can easily follow a character's attention around and have it just read like chaotic nonsense, because human beings usually don't have like the most coherent mental lives actually, but doing it in a way where it just like flows in this like seeping dread comes through the page, and but without violating the rule of like you're following Victoria's thoughts and attention and mind and perceptions. I'm just, yeah. I mean, we're going to go through it all now, but I just wanted to kind of like stand back from it and appreciate this chapter and the next chapter for doing what they do. To my mind, that's my kind of way of understanding what's happening from a writing point of view.
I love that, because I love that whole idea, because they're like human beings don't have establishing shots in their head, right? Like we don't walk into a building and describe think about, oh, there's a window over there and there's a door over there and there's a wall here and there's people standing there. Like we don't do that. That's not the way you work. But like books sometimes require that so you can set the scene for your readers. So the way that this specifically and I think the stories in general are able to still have those establishing kind of descriptions without breaking the rule of the point of view, I think is commendable. And how it's done here is the reason why she's setting the scene, to me, in my interpretation, is she's avoiding looking at the thing she doesn't want to look at. So she's looking elsewhere. She's trying to focus on other things as she works her mental energy up to seeing the one thing that is going to truly disturb her. And it just works. It just works so well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's going to come through really hard, particularly in the next chapter, is this idea that it's not what she's thinking, it's what she's not thinking.
Yeah.
That is actually successfully conveyed to us based on how well we know her.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
And so before we move on, there's also this wonderful other beat of how she floats over the entire scene. So she's flying over the scene. Now, it's so she won't contaminate the scene, which is absolutely true. It's a practical reason to not contaminate the scene. But in the language of Victoria, flying is disconnecting, right? Like she's said this many times before. When you fly, you kind of disconnect from the world. And I don't know if that's like a conscious decision on her part here. In fact, I don't think it is at all. But I think it's reinforced, like, once again, how tough this is for her, how disturbing this is, her decision to fly here. Yeah.
There's definitely want to pay attention to the flying in this chapter.
Yeah.
So Victoria now speaks to the cop who's in charge, and this cop expresses that the cops are not equipped to deal with costume on costume crime, in her words. So basically, this case is not going to be solved if Vicky and her crew can't make headway.
Yeah, which is putting a lot of pressure on our characters, but also, I mean, once again, establishing the fact that this is truly horrifying, that the cops are just like,
Yeah.
Like, there's no.
Part of me is also wondering if the cops aren't, like, it's not that they're not equipped, it's that they're like, we don't really care about costume on costume crime.
That could be a read. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we see anything definitive about that. Like we see like any kind of thing in the text about that, but it just goes with what's happening in the background. But I mean, it seems to me like the main cop in charge, because I think Victoria comments on this, is sincere in her, like, when she says, like, look, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, she seems a little sincere, and I think Victoria remarks on her sincerity. But yeah, I mean, there could be something there. She
actually seems legitimately kind of fucked up about it later too. So
yeah, well, because it's fucked up.
Yeah. Let's get there. So Victoria thinks about these victims, the navigators, and what she knows about the individual members. We have a name that I'm going to just pronounce as Nailfarer. Probably has some better Norse pronunciation, but Nailfarer is the first that we metaphorically meet in her mind. We even learn her trigger event as a victim of human trafficking. Her name is a reference to her past more than a reference to her power. Her power is apparently to turn dead tissue into doors.
Yeah, that's a thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But so I think Wildbow is doing something really clever here, because the chapter after this one is going to be this intensely emotional experience. It's going to fuck you up. But we don't know Nailfarer. We don't know Slingstone. We don't know Scaffold. We don't really know these people. Not really. And we don't have to fully understand their background in order to empathize with them, especially since that empathy is going to kind of be driven through Victoria and Victoria's experience. But we need something. And in this moment, before we understand the full scope of the horror of the situation, it just reads as a sad backstory for dead characters. We lost these characters. It goes out of its way to reinforce that these are people who had terrible shit happen to them, and they found a way to try to do good despite all this terrible stuff that happened to them. And it's just kind of, well, that's a fucking bummer. But obviously it becomes something so much more in the next chapter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't have anything to add to that. Even that's exactly the function of why we're getting to know them here.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we're doing here is Victoria is drawing connections between these characters and herself and her family. Like, she's describing Scaffold's power, and she relates it to her Aunt Sarah. She said Aunt Sarah had Adatz's power. So did Crystal. So had Eric. Me and my mom, not so much. She's drawing those lines between these dead people and her family, especially the one member of her family who has also died. I think the subtext of this whole thing is like, this could have been us. Like, this could have happened to people I knew. Like it's seriously affecting her, and we haven't even gotten to the most horrible part yet.
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely true. That's one thing the text is doing throughout both of these chapters, is making sure that we appreciate how Victoria is connected to this without necessarily having her say, like, I felt sad about this because I was connected to this. Yeah. So we spend a little bit less time on Slingstone and Scaffold, relatively. We learn enough to kind of see them as people, though. And I think that's fine, because Nailfarer is the one we're going to spend more time with. Mm-hmm. The hero capes then methodically examine the crime scene. They're all upset, like in the abstract, like they're not having a fun time. But none of them is really letting the horror like get under their skin. Nobody's freaking out. Nobody's having like an emotional meltdown. After mentally putting together some details of the attack, like the presence of a large, monstrous attacker, Victoria joins Laser Dream to examine Scaffold, whose head has been impaled on a scaffold of his own making. Yeah,
these fucked up fuckers certainly have a sense of irony. Hooray.
Yeah, artistic. So the text, I think, more than once notes that the body parts are red. And here it says red and glistening. And honestly, I read that and I was like, I guess maybe Wildbow made a mistake, because I think these bodies have probably been here long enough that the blood wouldn't be like red and glistening anymore. Oh well. And
that was your mistake.
That was my mistake, because that's a clue that lets our protagonist realize that the giblets are not actually dead.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything about this revelation yet, because we're going to talk about it a bunch next chapter, but this fucked me up, Matt. This fucked me up big time.
Yeah. Yep. So as everyone begins to react to this, the text says the woman in charge had to shout at people who were heading to the bushes to throw up, because pieces had been strewn so far and wide across the field that there might be some in the bushes.
I love that sentence. Like, I love how powerful and matter of fact and just like functional it is. Like it just establishes everything you need to know. Just how far all these pieces are thrown, just how screwed up everyone is. Like, it's perfect. It really is perfect. I love it.
And it's not even like at somebody who is heading to the bushes. It's at people who are heading to the bushes, forcing you to imagine like everyone just reacting with such a like recoiling so dramatically that just like multiple people had to go vomit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel so as this chapter wraps up, and this is kind of stuff that's going to be set up going into the next chapter, but I feel like as this chapter wraps up is a time to kind of air these thoughts. I feel like a lot of what's happening, not only in these chapters, but maybe even in the whole preceding arc or so, has been establishing red herrings, establishing possible parties who could have done this. Because like you're like, oh, there's a shovel and a monster. Was it the K-53s? No, there's dismemberment shenanigans. Was it Disjoint and Side Piece, March and the Grey Twins, Panacea, Bonesaw, Bitter Pill, Mysterious Barcode member, some Tinker copying their power? So like we realize how many like body part and biology powers have been implicated in what's happened here.
Yeah. And the cool thing about this is I think every single one of these red herrings could have like really interesting narrative consequences for our characters, right? Because like if it's Case 53s, that means something big for Sveta. If it's Disjoint and Side Piece, those are the guys that we just let go that yesterday or whenever that was. I guess it was probably earlier today, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. Like there's each one of these has some potential consequence and how it's going to relate to one of our characters. So like that's the sign of a good red herring, that you could like that the which one it is doesn't become immediately obvious because they all seem to fit your story.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, the most kind of interesting and resonant one would have something to do with some Case 53s involved with this whole thing, because like this arc has gone out of its way to focus on Sveta a little bit and people that she called family before doing this thing to someone would be something that Sveta would have a very, very hard time with, and that could advance her storyline a little bit. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily definitely going to be the one. But like you can see like that future line of conflict. Yeah,
that would fit. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that these red herrings we didn't even realize we were seeing red herrings being set up, right? But,
yeah.
But I think that's what was happening, and I think that was intentional.
Yeah.
So we move on into 10.11, which is
oh boy,
somehow even more harrowing than a chapter where they found out that all the body parts were alive.
Oh boy.
So the first sentence of this chapter is what we immediately recognize as the old communication protocol that Victoria had to use back when she was a blob. And it takes us a moment to understand that it's Victoria speaking, assisting Nailfarer, and it's a gut punch.
Yeah. So I think we've got a lot to say about like this chapter as a whole, and we're going to spend a lot of time kind of diving into the details, into the language here. But before we did all that, I want to just talk about this whole thing from a high level, right? Yeah. I want to talk about this scene as a whole, and I want to talk about how this scene got me in a way that I'm not sure if any of the terrible things that have happened in these past two books have gotten me before. I was like visibly uncomfortable. Like if someone was watching me read the story, I was visibly uncomfortable reading through all this. I had to walk away from my computer. I did. I had to get up and leave and like, you know, walk through my thoughts a little bit and then like gird myself and come sit back down and power through the rest of this chapter. And you know, I am an emotional person. I react to stories a lot, but that is not an experience that I'm used to having while reading a book. It just doesn't happen to me very often. So I was immediately interested in why this particular thing. Like there's been so many terrible things that have happened in the story, right? Like there's so many disturbing images and torturous things that happen to people in this story. Why this one? And I when analyzing it, I think the key to all this for me is, unsurprisingly, you know, Victoria, our point of view character. And I don't want to say this as like her emotional reaction is more important than the three people that are chopped into pieces and suffering. Like, obviously that's horrible, but I'm just like what Victoria is going through right here elevates this from just, oh my God, this is horrible, to I got to leave the room. Mm-hmm. And I think you kind of hinted towards it last chapter that it's not what Victoria is doing here, it's what Victoria is not doing. And what Victoria is not doing in this chapter is the thing that we've seen her do throughout this entire book. This introspective, think about all the stuff and process through this stuff in her internal monologue. Like, she is almost specifically not thinking about things, right? Like, she's avoiding thinking about anything as much as possible. And her thoughts are all kind of focused and mechanical and like physical and
pragmatic.
Yeah, exactly. And that is such a fundamental kind of like, vocal change between the narrative story that we've read up until this point, that it just kind of like it brings you to a new, different kind of level. And as you realize it's happening, it goes from oh my god to oh god.
Yeah. What it reminds me of any time where I've been in a emergency situation. My thoughts basically go blank and I just do what I need to do.
Yeah.
And that's like exactly what I like read into the change in the narrative voice here, where she's like I don't want to say in shock, but because she's functioning like exactly, she's doing exactly what she needs to do, but she's just setting aside herself entirely.
Yeah.
And that's really poignant, right? And I think that's part of what really hits hard.
Yeah. And when she does think about herself, it is all kind of physically focused. My voice doesn't sound like mine, right? It is that's as far as she goes, and then she walks it back. She doesn't dive into anything else. Like, Victoria never in her internal narrative mentions that this is the code that was used on her when she was in the hospital. Mm-hmm. It is said once in the story, but it's not her that brings it up. It's kind of brought up to her by Crystal. Like, she never even, she doesn't, it's just not there. Like, none of that thought process is there. We just don't see it. Cause she has shut down part of her. And she's like desperately trying to get through this entire section without making this link, without linking her to what this person's going through. And I think for writing to be able to convey the connection, like for people that haven't read Worm in a while, maybe forgot this code system, to be able to convey that without having your point of view character explicitly spell it out for you, while also keeping her in her narrative voice and making it distinct that this is a different place. It's just so good. And it's so well constructed, and it's what makes this awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Feel like I should point out now that there were probably more than one point in Twig that actually hit me this hard, but anyway.
Oh, great! I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, that's a huge selling point actually, because like, how often do things make you actually feel things this way?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So back into the actual text.
Sorry.
I mean, something like this you have to talk about in kind of a loping way, right?
Yeah.
So Crystal is consistently trying to coax Victoria to stop and leave and let someone else do this. Crystal seems to actually be taking these events harder than Victoria, Cuff, or Golem, actually, like based on the way she's behaving.
Yeah, and I think this kind of helps propel the horror to something else too. I think Victoria is afraid to make the connection in her head. Crystal is afraid to do anything that also connects Victoria back to that moment, right? Like, there's this like multi-armed elephant hanging about right now, and these two characters are like trying as hard as they can not to mention it while also getting through this whole thing. And Crystal, I think, is I don't think she's taking it as hard as Victoria, but she's expressing it in a very different way that Victoria is.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Victoria has like a warrior psyche. Like it's fair to say that. Mm-hmm. Crystal, throughout this story, I'm thinking specifically of the Broken Trigger event.
Yeah.
is like reacts much more the way a normal human would react to being thrown into the midst of horrifying events. And she does her best, which is very admirable. But she doesn't have like she was like crying in that scene. She's really upset here. She's really emotional. And it's again like reasonable human reaction to horrible things. But it's just interesting to contrast how different Victoria is from her cousin actually in this way.
Yeah. And one of the crazy things about how Victoria is handling this is it carries forward into everything else. Like if you look at the meeting that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, there's very little Victoria introspection there either. Like this survival mechanism she's switched on to get through this stuff, it doesn't switch off so easily.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't get over this chapter. So not only is this some of the most gut-wrenching emotional material we've ever covered on the show, but Wildbow also manages to seamlessly convey the rules of the system that we, probably forgot or never entirely knew, so that we understand what's being communicated, and also so that certain things land extra hard. So like very quickly and seamlessly, and like without even realizing we're learning it, we understand 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for maybe. And then when there's a binary choice, the eye movement signals the choice, and it's like, man, we got it. We're on board, and nowhere did the text have to like stop and explain the system to us.
Yeah, I think one of the constant strengths of this writing is taking form and function and kind of harmonizing them in great new ways. And I think this is another example of that. And what's more, this text, like, it often makes us sit with the functional like requirements of this communication. I think we talked about this when Victoria was doing it, and I think that we're seeing it here again in a different way. We occasionally accelerate through the structure of the communication because it takes a long time to express anything this way. We occasionally like hit fast forward and just have the text read out something. But we also have moments where the story makes us hold on to it, where it doesn't let us escape from this methodical, rote necessity of this way of communication. Like that when she says she's cold, we have to go through each and every step of this thing to get to spell cold. And it's like, I think it forces us to be there with it, but I think it also maps to Victoria's whole strategy for dealing with this thing, because she's focusing on that very rote mechanical nature. She's focusing on the step-by-step way to get through this. Focus on these things. Don't think about the other things. And it works. It works functionally. It works, artistically. It works narratively. Like, it works in every kind of way.
Yeah, I agree completely. So Nailfair, or part of Nailfair's head that has an eye attached, communicates that she wants it to be cold because the cold brings numbness, which implies that numbness is required, which implies that they can feel their injuries.
Yeah, it gets worse. It was bad, and then it goes worse.
So they're in constant pain and existential horror.
Awesome.
Yep. So Victoria puts out some messages to warn the capes in her network that, bad shit's going down, but she withholds the details of what exactly happened because, even in this situation, she's aware of how volatile the situation is.
Yeah, which I think is the most fascinating part about Victoria in these chapters to me, because with the exception of these 3 people that are going through this terrible thing, Victoria is probably like the most psychologically affected by this, right? Because like this is tying exactly back to one of the most terrible times in her life. But she's all about like controlling this and being rational and logical and thinking through it. Like, she's worried about like heroes going nuts and taking this personal and lashing out. But like, that's something that is a real possibility for her to do as well, but she's just not allowing herself to go there right now. And it's just like, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's awesome. So Victoria communicates to the doctors that Nailfair wants cold, and then there's like a disagreement over whether her hand should be kept out of the cooler. The doctor wants it kept out of the cooler so she can communicate better, and Victoria's like, she doesn't need it to be out of the cooler, and the doctor just kind of forces the issue.
Yeah. I think one of the things I think this is doing is kind of establishing an us versus them nature of this whole thing. Like, Victoria knows what this poor woman is going through, and it immediately kind of engenders Victoria to her side. That, like, the doctor, for all his good intentions, doesn't understand. Nobody understands what you're going through. Nobody but me, because I've gone through something similar to this. And it's a great way of, I'm not saying they're going to be in specific conflict, but like, she's so with her immediately and against like anyone that doesn't quite understand this whole thing.
Right. She instantly slips into this role of being Nailfare's advocate.
Yeah.
And just like whatever she needs to do to help, and she's like trying to like think in advance of what could be helpful, and and like the doctor is obviously doing their job as a doctor, right? But like,
yeah.
But Victoria is just like, I'm trying to do everything I can to make them suffer less, because she just like feels for them so acutely.
Yeah.
So there's several moments here that I'm going to read just because I have to.
Okay.
Just let me know, I said. I'm staying close. The fingers moved clumsily, not like a hand should. One finger tapped hard against the metal pan it had been laid down on. One tap equivalent for one blink. And then a bit later, I'm going to stay with Nailfare, I said. I think we worked out our communication system pretty well. One sharp tap on the metal pan. Cuff jumped. Yeah, pretty well, I said, my heart breaking a little. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at with like just understanding the communication method and letting us get like the one bit of information from Nailfare is still enough to crush us.
Yeah. I don't even have anything analytical to say about that other than it's just
right.
I'm feeling the feelings I felt the first time I read it. They're coming back. So it's
just reminding everyone that happened.
Yeah.
So then Victoria and Crystal have something between a throwdown and a mutual breakdown, as Crystal pleads for her to go home and let somebody else handle this, and Victoria stubbornly insists that she's going to stay and help.
Mm-hmm.
And so Crystal says, "You don't have to get involved with it, Victoria." "I can't imagine a world where I'm not," I answered. Crystal folded her arms. I folded mine, staring her down.
Yeah, I think, Crystal means really well here. She's trying to look out for her cousin. There's just no, like, just as Victoria says, there's no way she can leave the situation. Like when she was in the situation they are in, one of her biggest complaints is people abandoned her, people left her, and she is not capable of doing that. Like she won't. And I kind of love that about her, and I love how agitated they get at each other without like this is not like this is a conflict. Like they're fighting here, but it's like it doesn't go too far, right? Like it's still kind of controlled.
The thing is that Crystal's agitation is from a place of love, and Victoria knows that, so they're not going to start screaming at each other.
Yeah.
But it is heated at the same time.
Well, and I love how the text kind of expresses the agitation, right? Because we have like Crystal's getting increasingly wound up, and then like at the very end of this argument, she almost blows her cover. Like she says, "Yeah, we were in a war zone," and then Golem, like Golem or Weld, like immediately gives her a look like, and it's just like she gets really close to betraying some confidential information. So that's like a really good, quick illustration of how agitated she is, that she makes that slip up. It's very revealing, and it's like a very efficient way of doing that, and I liked it.
Yeah, me too. So this is like a complete tangent, and I just sometimes I like to let the Byron chocolate part of me out for some fresh air. But like at some point I kind of suspected just briefly, like maybe Crystal has some other motive for wanting to pull Vicky away from this. Like she knows something about this situation, and she's apprehensive about Victoria getting involved, and she's it's like the scene of the movie where the corrupt cop is like, "You don't want anything to do with this, Mackenzie," and you think that it's because he's lazy, but actually he doesn't want Mackenzie to get shot by the mob.
Like she knows who's responsible for this or something.
She knows who's responsible for this, or she has some insight into the situation.
Interesting.
And is almost like, I just don't want my cousin to get roped into this. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I honestly don't really believe this, but it popped into my head. So
yeah, I didn't see that in any of this, but that doesn't mean it's not impossible. I mean, to me, her objection comes definitely from a place of, I'm trying to shield you from the stuff that I know is going to destroy you or lead you to a path of destruction. And but maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, if we do these shows long enough, one of these days, one of the Byron's chocolate type assertions is going to be true. So look, I'm just going to always make them.
That was the strategy, like, for Scott Speculations, like the whole way through, and it paid off.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean, I was only like 50% right, but when I was right, I went for the fences and hit a couple home runs.
Yeah, it's true.
So yeah, just go for it, man. Just go for it.
All right.
So we also learn in this moment that there are parts of each of these people that are missing, right? So that whoever did this took parts of them with them so that they couldn't like put Humpty Dumpty back together again or something. And the Victoria's reaction to this is, good to know. Complete another monsters, but it fills out the picture. And Crystal's response is, you couldn't sound less honest if you tried filling out the picture. Don't pretend you're objective about all this. And Victoria like doesn't even confront her about it. She just kind of looks away and talks to someone else. Like, yeah, she's obviously not objective about this. She's obviously like, there's something bubbling underneath her all. And that's kind of the scary part about the rest of this chapter is I think there's like, she's closed off that part of her, but it's going to bubble over eventually. And just like Crystal, I'm worried about her if she keeps pushing that down and not feeling it.
Yeah, it doesn't really describe Victoria's affect, right? In fact, Victoria's point of view rarely describes Victoria's affect. So we're forced to imagine what it must be. And you kind of do imagine that she's like putting on this air of lightness here, but not succeeding probably.
Yeah.
So.
And before we move on, like as Victoria heads into the ambulance to go with them, we have like our new buddy team like say goodbye to each other, and there's the kind of sweet moment where Vista apologizes for them always having to meet these ways, and Golem like gives this like badass Brockton Bay squad for life like inspiring thing, like we're from Brockton Bay, we can take this. And then we get this wonderful little beat where Cuff like shakes her hand and mentions like how much she's fucked up about this, and we get the text describes Victoria squeezing her gauntlet like in like solidarity. And I just love like there's this group of people just like met each other, and like a lot of them didn't know anything about each other very much except for a few of them. They're all kind of linked through some common people, but they don't know about it. And like it seems to me that this terrible, horrible event like brought them together in some way, like turned them into a group. Not like a team or anything, but they have a shared experience now. And I hope we see more of this group together.
Yeah, right. It does seem like they kind of became instantly like bonded over all this.
Yeah.
So I haven't mentioned yet that in this chapter, Victoria is interchangeably calling her Wayfarer and Dayu. Mm-hmm. Not sure what, I guess Dayu.
Yeah.
And so Victoria is holding Dayu's hand, and the other woman grips back firmly as they start to drive toward the hospital. Dayu asks about her team, which is another gut punch. Mm-hmm. And then we have this moment. A paramedic came to the back of the ambulance. He paused as he saw me. You're coming? I nodded. You know her? Getting to? The hand moved. I held the wrist instead of the fingers and held the hand up so the fingers wouldn't be scraping and bumping against the surface. The hand was heavier than the length of the arm it was attached to. She shook so much, with effort, with stress, and probably with emotion. One thumb partially extended, fingers drawn most of the way in. Good enough, the paramedic said. The feels, Scott.
Oh my god. And like the way, so this is emotionally devastating. And then we have, as this section ends and we move on, thankfully, we have Victoria kind of break down for the first time, right? Like she starts crying and she positions herself so no one can see her cry, but she loses it here. And again, we still don't have any kind of introspection. She still hasn't, like, in her mind been consciously thinking about her time at the hospital. Like, she hasn't done that, but it's still ripping her apart.
Yeah, right. You know, it's interesting to me. It's like her composure slips momentarily and she lets some tears out. But, like, I feel like this wasn't really a good cry either. This was like yeah.
She has not released that valve at all.
Yeah, right. So we skip some time. I'm not actually sure how much. Maybe the text tells us. I'm not sure. But Victoria returns to her apartment and steals some food from the Ashleys, who are awake. She kind of sort of updates them, but not really. I would say
it's really, really early in the morning. Like, she said she was going to stay all night with the guys. So it's Crystal was going to come by and relieve her in the morning. So I think it's the day of the villain meeting, right?
Yeah.
That's when I think it is. Yeah. You were just going to, like, skip by the Ashley squared cuddle session, Matt. You didn't put anything about it in the notes, and I was like, "What's going on here?"
No,
I mean, it's like it's not, like, super important, but I love it. I love how it's, like, not like Damsel's head is on Ashley's lap, Ashley's feet are on Damsel's lap. Like, it's this very, like, mutually, like, the symbiotic, like sleep posture.
Yeah. Two cats curled around each other.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I, like, it's like they're, you know, relying on each other and like, it's just, I don't know. I like it a lot. I like their entire interaction. Like, there's this sleepy damsel interaction of, like, sleepily talking about destroying all the people. And she's like, not yet. I don't know where we're going with these two characters yet. Like, I don't know what the text is going to explore with their continued growing bond and interaction, but I'm into it a lot.
Yeah, me too. So as she gets her snacks together, she uses her flight in a very silly utilitarian way, which I can't help but read deeply into. Yeah,
and as we mentioned earlier, the language of Victoria says that flying is disconnecting. So yes, she's like floating, like, backstroke with food on her, right? Because she can't afford to carry it. But again, like, we've established this as being meaningful in some way. So
yeah, I feel like there's a number of other possibilities. Like, I mean, so for one thing, it's saying is, like, she's so tired that she can't just, like, make 2 trips from the kitchen to the bedroom.
Yeah.
She's just like, fuck it. And behaves in a way which, like, she makes sure no one's looking because she knows it's ridiculous. And, like, it's not the kind of thing that she would normally do.
Yeah.
But she does it. And then also there's, like, anytime she uses her flight casually, it doesn't just mean disconnection, right? Because, like, she's used it as a way of expressing, like, triumph and almost like joy back when they were succeeding and they were getting kind of headway in their Cape organization.
Yeah, that's true.
But, like, there's no reason she should really be feeling joy here. Like, for me, it's really just kind of I'm so tired, I'm just going to use flight. Like,
yeah. I agree with that.
So now she gets in touch with Dragon, and Dragon has more info for her. And we then kind of skip some time, and later on there's a hero meeting, in a sense paralleling the huge villain meeting that's going to be happening shortly. And we meet Cinerial, is that how you say it?
Sure.
Somebody we haven't really met, but I know I've read the name a few times up to this point. Victoria describes her as scary as shit. But what's interesting is, like, she's like, it's not the costume, it's just the look on her face. And so I kind of view her as having this permanent Judge Dredd face.
That's a wonderful description. And now there's no way I don't see her in a Judge Dredd uniform every time I read about her anymore.
With,
so,
like, the inverted U-shaped mouth.
Yeah. Those of you that can't see this, Matt is making a face right now, and it's wonderful. So I think it's like, we don't know who this character is, right? But the book kind of stops briefly here to give a pretty comprehensive description of them, which tends to indicate that they're going to play a role in things to come, that they are a character that's going to matter in some way in the future. So I'm kind of interested to see where the book goes with this character, this hard ass character that we've just met.
Yeah. Hard ass, but maybe with a heart of gold.
Maybe.
So as Victoria updates the other heroes, we learn a bit more about what's happened in the background, what Dragon found out. Apparently, the attackers baited the navigators to the scene using a carefully crafted offer. Another different offer was extended to the Super Magic Dream Parade, which was also crafted for their interests specifically.
But they didn't accept.
They didn't accept because they don't use the internet that much. So good for them. Swan Song is the one actually who interjects to remind everyone that the heroes can't afford to respond emotionally to what is obviously intended as provocation. And she says this before Victoria goes on to relay what actually happened to the victims.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's Swan Song that says this. The person who like responds to provocation very specifically, like it shows an elevated move for her character. But again, look how she says it. Like, the reason Antares is urging caution is that we can't be baited by provocation, and we can't let emotions cloud our search for the personal. And Victoria says, exactly. But this is insanely personal for her. Like, we know this. Like, the text is not betraying this, but because she hasn't admitted it yet, but it is. She's holding something back right now. She's being this calm, collected professional. She's still not really being introspective here. We're still seeing much less of her internal narrative than we have at any other point in the story, but it's still there under the surface. Like I go back, when I read this part, I had Crystal in my mind echoing, don't pretend you're objective about all this. Don't pretend you are. Of course you're not. There's no way you can be. And you're doing it here to functionally make it through this, but what happens when that breaks?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting because not only is she being like, is her position like seemingly objective, but she's like more objective than anyone else here.
Yeah.
Like everyone else is emotional and reactive. I mean, we'll get to it, right? Like, so first of all, like it's like her buttons are being pushed and she's still remaining because Lark brings up the possibility that it might be Amy behind the attack. And even first of all, Victoria doesn't like shut down or have like a triggered reaction. She's just kind of like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, we don't see any moment in her brain where she even considers this for a moment, right? Like there's no internal narrative that says, well, could it be? I don't think so. I mean, probably not, but I think she's like, this is not there. She's just immediately like, no.
Yeah, she doesn't even think like, wouldn't put it past her. It's just like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, this is so fundamentally different from her every other time Amy's been brought up. Like even in the times when she was doing okay and could like say her name without going into a panic attack, there's still been this moment of like grimacing or like internal like, it's just not here. Just not here. And that's terrifying.
Yeah. Well, terrifying, but is it terrifying? I mean, see, I think I'm actually reacting to this a bit differently than you. I just think it's very interesting, and I'm not sure where it's going.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe you're exactly right, though.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as, I mean, I have a hard time seeing it as a good thing. Not that like her freaking out every time her sister mentioned is objectively a good thing, but to me, it says. Like, I don't think she's at an emotional place where that stuff just doesn't bother her anymore. So like if it's not hitting her, then it's being stored somewhere. And I worry, when that storage room is full, what happens?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like this event that's been happening for the last few hours has been like wonderful and healing and positive for her, of course. Right. But there have been elements of it that are potentially cathartic. Like being able to help someone who was in the position that she was in might have been cathartic in a way. Yes, painful, and yes, bringing up all kinds of terrible things, but in a way that might have been therapeutic in some way. Like I think there's some positive and some negatives, basically.
Yeah, I could see that. I like that interpretation. Yeah.
Like you say, it's worrying though that she's not like thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, too many of the invited hero teams are emotional and reactive. It's almost as if the navigators were targeted because they're so well loved and connected. The most Victoria gets out of them is a promise not to move on the villains for the next 6 hours.
Yeah. And so we have Victoria, pragmatic, rational Victoria here is like not being baited by any of this where
Yeah.
everyone else is. And I think we kind of already talked about this when we went off topic earlier in the discussion, but I want to compare this meeting to Tattletale's meeting, because they both attend meetings in which their teams are hot, villains and heroes respectively are headed, they're angry, they want decisive action, they see the writing on the wall and they want to do something about it. Tattletale's response in that situation is to step back, to let it happen. She says it's inevitable anyway, and she's tired and she just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. Victoria's not that same type of person, and she like can't step back. She can't just let the angry horde of heroes roll over and take out whoever they want on their way to seek revenge for this thing, especially since that could be exactly what they're trying to do here, right? She's got to do something. She's got to try to stop this from happening. So she's going to do it. And I think that's like a fundamental difference between who these two people are as characters. And I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, right? I'm just saying that they're different choices made by characters when put in similar positions.
Yeah, no, that definitely seems like a parallel. I mean, I there's a lot of differences between these two meetings, but I just feel like they are being paralleled, and of course the characters' reactions to basically, like you said, the participants of the meetings are both behaving very similarly, but the reactions of the point of view characters are opposed.
Yeah. And that's where we end our chapter. 6 hours till the meeting we know is going to turn into a riot, with Breakthrough and their closest allies on a mission to solve the case before the time runs out. And it's an exciting place to be. I think it feels like we're moving into like the climax of the arc, right? Like this feels like it's going to be the climactic conflict of the arc proper.
Yeah, I feel like you're right.
Yeah. So do you have any guesses as to what's going on here? As to like who's responsible for this? Why is it happening? Because like it seems like on the surface there's a very real indication that sides are being manipulated to force them into conflict with each other. And if I look at who benefits most from the heroes and the villains destroying each other, it's the people trying to convince everyone that capes are inherently destructive and are bad and should not be allowed to be in charge of everything, and trying to get them on their side. So, I mean, I don't know that, but it seems like the anti-parahuman sentiment would most benefit from heroes and villains like going full tilt at each other. Yeah.
The thing is, there's so many, game pieces on the board that like it could be an elaborate, Rube Goldberg machine on teacher's part, like setting all this up to create some outcome he wants. It could be Dinah being a precog and basically just taking necessary steps to get what she knows is going to be the best outcome, even if it results in really bad things temporarily. It could be some other some party that we're not really familiar with who has some other agenda that we don't know about. It could be, that's the thing is, it could either be a Rube Goldberg machine designed to prop up the heroes, prop up the villains, prop up the fallen, prop up teacher, prop up Dinah, and I don't know. There's and I think that's something we've identified before about the reason these stories work so well is there are so many credible red herrings as to what could be going on that maybe I just said the true answer somewhere in there. Maybe not. If I did say it, I don't deserve any credit for forecasting, because the point is that I'm just listing the possibilities that are evident, right?
Yeah.
So
I'll give you credit, Matt.
Yeah, Matt correctly predicted. Okay. No. All right, let's wrap up with some name game.
Sure.
I think we'll just stick to Nailfarer because we kind of focused on that character.
Yeah.
So apparently this is Old Norse and probably pronounced very differently than that. Well, I'm not even going to try to say it, but it's a boat made entirely from the fingernails and toenails of the dead, or possibly just made from the corpses of the dead, depending on what expert you believe, because there's some who say that that particular word just means corpses when used in certain contexts. And this boat is foretold to ferry hordes to the underworld that will do battle with the gods. I think at the end of the world.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, and of course, Nailfare is triggered while on a overseas passage, right, where they were being horribly cruel to them, and like many people died while on the trip. So that fits very thematically. Good way to pick your name, Nailfare. I like that foretold to fairy hordes that will do battle with the gods. I like that, like seeing Nailfare as like the instigating event that brings this battle between godlike parahumans against each other. So I like that kind of through line.
Yeah, it didn't really occur to me until now, but there's kind of a connection to Valkyrie, as a Norse figure of the underworld.
Yeah, there you go. Confirmation that Valkyrie did it. It was Valkyrie.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, well, yeah, I have no real way of connecting it, but like this all does seem like it's related to whatever it is that Valkyrie's terrified of. All right, so discussion question for this week. The world of parahumans is a dark place, and Wildbow frequently employs horrific and disturbing imagery to reinforce this fact. Discuss this approach to storytelling.
Yeah, so I think we kind of wanted this one to be more open-ended, as you could probably tell by that question. I think we just want you guys to talk about like how does this enhance the things that he's trying to do? I mean, most people here obviously like it, right? But there's a lot of people out there that get very disturbed by this kind of stuff in their media. So maybe there's people that like the story but don't like that aspect of it as much. And I want people to explore how they feel about it and its effectiveness and its function in storytelling.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah.
That's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaly85 and Matt's is at 50 little live pieces more mail.
And if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other podcasts we do over at doofmedia.com. Matt, we released the new episode of We've Got Weaver Dice. Episode 5 came out Sunday night. It is out there. It exists. We did it.
Right on schedule.
Yep, exactly. That was the plan the whole time. So if you haven't gone and listened to that yet, if you haven't listened to our Weaver Dice campaign at all yet, check it out. I'm really, really enjoying doing it. We obviously took a very long hiatus between the 4th and 5th episode, but I think we're trying to get back onto a semi-regular schedule with that. So re-listening to the episode kind of reminded me of how much fun I have doing that. So I think it's really inspired all of us to make it a priority again. So.
Yeah, ditto as the DM. So if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art costume or costume contests, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions like this one, and our excellent Discord chat. And of course, special thanks to new Bidoofs, Catlin at the $1 level, Nicholas G at the $1.50 level, and Sean at the $1 level. New Doof Troop member Jeremy at the at the $10 level. Thank you. And Doof Warrior Prof upgraded to the $20 level.
Yeah, Prof upgraded 20 so he can make us watch anime.
Yay!
Thanks, Prof.
Yeah, as always, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, seriously, thanks, guys, so much. It means a lot to us. Matt, we are $25 away from our next patron goal, which is the launching of Doof Plays, because we didn't have enough to do already. We're going to do more stuff. I love it. This is our attempt to kind of explore the world of streaming of video games. We've got a lot of fun ideas that hopefully will kind of differentiate ourselves from, just normal average game streaming. Not that those people don't do great work. I have respect for people that can be entertaining and play video games for hours, but we kind of want to put a doof spin on it. So we've got a bunch of great ideas about that, and we're so close to that goal. So if you want to donate, it's a great time to do it.
Yeah. And as always, while you're over on Patreon, make sure you go over to Wildbow's page, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. we're just collecting giblets in it.
Oh, Jesus. If you can't afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can instead help us out by heading on over to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a rating and a review. We have no new reviews to read this week, but keep them coming. They really do help us get exposure. And Matt really, really likes exposing himself.
All right. That's it. That's all for us this week. Next week, more Polarize.
Matt, I feel like something really bad is going to happen soon. I mean, like more bad than 3 people being chopped up into little bits and then forced to continue to live as they feel the pain of all the individual little bits.
Worse than that?
Yeah.